Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Sub-Lieutenant Jed Goggin. We warmly welcome the family of Private George Ernest Weir, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony around Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private George Weir, who was killed fighting in France in the First World War. George Weir was born in 1895, one of 6 children of David and Isabella Weir of Kiama in the Illawarra region of New South Wales. George attended school in the district and later paraded with the local cadet unit as a part of the government's compulsory military service scheme. On the eve of the First World War, he was working as a farmer. George Weir enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in August 1915, and after a period of training at the Holsworthy military camp, embarked for training camps in Egypt with a reinforcement group of the 3rd Battalion. The fighting on Gallipoli had ended by the time George arrived. However, in the following months in Egypt was spent training as the AIF underwent a major restructure in preparation for its departure for the Western Front. After arriving in France in April 1916, Weir spent several weeks in the relative quiet nursery sector near the town of Armentières, where most of the fighting consisted of patrolling and trench raids on the German trenches. In July, the 3rd Battalion was sent further south to the Somme, where they took part in the capture of Pozières village. On the 23rd of July, the day that Pozières fell to the Australians, Weir was wounded in the face by shrapnel. He was evacuated by a hospital train to a field hospital at Boulogne. Weir spent several weeks recovering from his wounds, returning to the battalion in September. Having suffered several heavy casualties on the Somme, the 3rd Battalion was sent north to Belgium in October for a period of rest and recovery in the relatively quiet Saint-Eloi sector south of Ypres. Once the battalion was brought back up to strength, it returned to the Somme in November to take up its winter positions, holding the line between the village of Fleur and Grildecourt, where the Australians spent the bitterly cold winter of 1916. Ground churned up by the artillery turned into morass when the rain began and the Australians filed into the line. In this sector, the bleak and miserable conditions were far greater enemies than the German army. Although the fighting was limited in the Flers sector, the Germans shelled the Australian position consistently throughout the winter. Work parties were forever rebuilding trenches destroyed by the bombardment. On the 6th of November 1916, one such shell landed amid a work party mending a trench in the 3rd Battalion lines. Among the casualties was George Weir, who is believed to have been killed in the explosion. His body was not recovered from the battlefield. Aged 24 at the time of his death, his body was never recovered. Today he's commemorated on the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretton alongside 10,737 Australians killed fighting in France with no known grave. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private George Weir, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, had thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and good evening.